The council chamber was massive, built to remind everyone who held power in the galaxy. It floated in orbit around Nexus Prime, a station so large it had its own weather systems inside the diplomatic wings. Jiwan stood in the center of the circular floor, surrounded by elevated seats where representatives from 13 elder species looked down at her. The architecture was designed to make visitors feel small. It worked on most species. The High Arbiter Velmoth sat highest among them all, his crystalline body refracting light in ways that hurt human eyes if you stared too long. His species, the Velkari, had ruled the council for over 800 years. They considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization, the perfect example of what a species could become if they evolved properly. Velmoth had personally overseen the integration of 42 younger species into the council's protective embrace. Ambassador Jiwan of Earth, Velmoth's voice resonated through the chamber, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. Your species has been evaluated. The council has reached a decision regarding humanity's place in galactic society. Jiwan stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back in a military posture she'd never quite abandoned, despite 15 years in diplomatic service. She'd commanded a destroyer squadron before this job. She knew how to face down threats. The chamber's environmental systems kept the air cool, but she could feel dozens of alien eyes watching her, waiting to see how humanity would react to whatever came next. The evaluation was thorough, Velmoth continued, and there was something in his tone that reminded Jiwan of a teacher about to scold a disappointing student. Your species is young, aggressive, and dangerously unpredictable. In the 15 years since first contact, humanity has expanded to 47 colony worlds. You've built a military fleet that rivals species who've been spacefaring for centuries. Your entertainment media glorifies violence. Your history is an endless cycle of warfare and destruction. Other council members nodded their various heads, appendages, and sensory organs in agreement. Counselor Threx, a hulking creature whose species communicated through color changes in their skin, flickered pale blue, which Jiwan had learned meant concern or unease. At least one of them felt uncomfortable about this. Therefore, Velmoth's voice took on a formal tone. The Galactic Council hereby demands the following actions from humanity. You will dismantle 90% of your military vessels within 6 standard months. You will surrender administrative control of all colony worlds beyond your home system to Council peacekeepers. You will submit to protective oversight, allowing Council observers to guide your governmental decisions. You will cease all independent exploration beyond your assigned territories. The chamber fell silent. This was the moment when younger species typically panicked. Jiwan had studied the recordings. The Nithral ambassador had begged for more time. The Korlax representative had attempted to negotiate. The Yendri had simply accepted, their ambassador weeping openly at their species' humiliation. Every species responded with some combination of fear, desperation, or resignation. Jiwan felt something bubble up in her chest. She tried to suppress it, but the absurdity was too much. These ancient species, these so-called pinnacles of civilization, had just threatened humanity. They'd evaluated Earth's bloody history and decided humans needed to be controlled. They'd looked at 5,000 years of continuous warfare and thought humanity would simply submit because some crystalline bureaucrat told them to. The sound that escaped her lips was quiet at first, just a small chuckle. But once it started, Jiwan couldn't stop it. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the massive chamber. It was genuine, uncontrolled laughter, the kind that came from somewhere deep and honest. The council members reacted with confusion. Velmoth's crystalline form flickered through several colors that Jiwan's translator couldn't interpret. Counselor Threx's skin went through a rapid cascade of colors that probably meant something like, "What the hell is happening? Ambassador?" Velmoth's voice was sharp now, angry. "You dare mock the council's judgment?" Jiwan wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I apologize, High Arbiter. That was unprofessional." She took a deep breath, but a smile still played at the corners of her mouth. "I need to request a recess. 72 hours, as is my species' right under council law. I must consult with my government regarding your demands." The way she said demands made it clear what she thought of them. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't how younger species were supposed to behave. "You may have your recess," Velmoth said slowly, "but understand this, Ambassador Jiwan. The Council's patience has limits. We've guided this galaxy for thousands of years. Younger species who refuse our wisdom do not prosper. When you return, we expect a proper answer, compliance or consequences. There is no third option. Jiwan bowed slightly, the smile never leaving her face. I understand perfectly, High Arbiter. When I return, humanity will give you an answer you'll remember. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. As the massive doors closed behind her, the council chamber erupted in discussion. Velmoth demanded silence. That species is more dangerous than our evaluation suggested. They show no proper respect for authority. When they return to beg for mercy, we will make an example of them. Let humanity be the lesson that reminds younger species why they need our guidance. But Counselor Threx's skin had turned a deep purple, which in his species meant deep concern bordering on fear. He'd studied humanity more thoroughly than the others. He'd read their literature, watched their historical records, tried to understand what made them different from other younger species. And in those records he'd found something disturbing. Humans laughed when they were confident. They laughed when they'd already won and their enemies just didn't know it yet. Outside the chamber, Jiwan stepped into her private shuttle. Her assistant, a young diplomat named Ki-hyun, looked at her with wide eyes. Ambassador, what just happened in there? I was monitoring from the shuttle. Did you really laugh at the Galactic Council? Jiwan settled into her seat and pulled up a secure communication channel to Earth. Ki-hyun, send a Priority 1 message to Secretary Taiho and Admiral Hyejin. Tell them the Council made their move exactly as we predicted 6 months ago. Tell them it's time for the history lesson. History lesson? Ki-hyun asked, confused. Jiwan's smile widened. These ancient species think they understand humanity because they read our history and saw all the wars. They think we're dangerous children who need to be controlled. They have no idea that our history didn't make us weak. It made us very, very good at one thing, winning against impossible odds. As the shuttle accelerated away from the council station, Jiwan looked back at the massive structure. Somewhere in there, the council was probably celebrating what they thought was their inevitable victory. They were ancient, powerful, and convinced of their own superiority. In 72 hours, they would learn exactly what happened when predators mistook humans for prey. The laughter had been real, but it wasn't mockery. It was recognition. Jiwan had seen this pattern before in Earth's own history, over and over. The arrogant empire, convinced of its righteousness, demanding submission from those they considered inferior. And then the shocked surprise when their victims fought back with weapons and strategies the empire never imagined possible. The council wanted humanity to be afraid. They would get something far more dangerous instead. They would get humans who'd been preparing for exactly this moment since the day they first met alien life and realized the galaxy wasn't as peaceful as the welcome broadcasts claimed. Jiwan opened a file on her personal datapad. Operation Wildfire, it was labeled. Humanity's contingency plan for the day the council showed its true nature. Admiral Hyejin had been building and positioning assets for months. Captain Bora's intelligence network had mapped every council secret. Dr. Minseo had documented every lie and crime the elder species had committed. In 72 hours, the council would get humanity's answer, and Jiwan suspected she'd get to laugh again when she delivered it. The emergency session room in Geneva was built 300 meters underground, shielded from every known form of surveillance. Taiho stood at the head of the conference table, watching the holographic displays populate with faces from across human space. Presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, and intelligence directors all appeared within seconds of his summons. Earth had been preparing for this moment, but now that it had arrived, the weight of it settled on everyone's shoulders. The council made their move. Taiho said simply, Ambassador Jiwan just transmitted the full recording from today's session. I'm sending it to all of you now. The room fell silent as the recording played. They watched Velmoth deliver his ultimatum, his crystalline form practically glowing with self-righteousness. They heard the impossible demands, the veiled threats, the assumption that humanity would simply submit like every younger species before them. And then they heard Jiwan laugh. Admiral Hyejin was the first to speak when the recording ended. She sat in her command center aboard the UES Resolution, humanity's largest carrier, currently positioned in the Outer Rim territories. That sound, she said with a grin, is the sound of someone who's been waiting 6 months to spring a trap. When do we move? 72 hours, Taiho replied. We use every minute to position our final assets and prepare the presentation. Dr. Minseo, what's the status of your research? A woman in her early 40s appeared in one of the holographic displays, surrounded by screens filled with alien text and historical records. Dr. Minseo had spent the last 5 years studying every piece of information humanity had gathered about the Galactic Council. She'd learned 17 alien languages, hacked into 6 different species' historical archives, and pieced together a picture of galactic history that the Council had worked very hard to keep hidden. The research is complete and verified, Minseo said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd barely slept in months. Every elder species in the Council rose to power through conquest and subjugation. The Velkari alone destroyed or absorbed 47 other species during their expansion phase. But here's the important part. About 2,000 years ago, the major powers realized that constant warfare was expensive and inefficient. So they formed the Council and created a new system. She pulled up a chart showing the timeline of Council history. They rewrote their own histories, painted themselves as peaceful and enlightened, and then used the Council structure to control younger species without expensive wars. They call it protective oversight. The reality is vassalization. 89 species have submitted to Council control in the past 2 millennia. Those species contribute technology, resources, and labor to the elder species while having no real voice in galactic affairs. Governor Ki-hyun, the civilian administrator of humanity's largest colony at New Busan, leaned forward in his display. So they're essentially running a protection racket on a galactic scale. They threaten younger species with military force, then offer protection in exchange for submission. Exactly, Minseo confirmed. And it's worked because no younger species has ever had the military capacity to resist, the intelligence network to expose them, or the cultural background to recognize the pattern. Until now. Captain Bora appeared in another display, her image fuzzy with military-grade encryption. She operated from an undisclosed location, commanding humanity's extensive intelligence network throughout Council space. My teams have compiled everything we need. Detailed records of Council military positions, trade routes, classified weapons programs, and political scandals. We've got evidence of the Council forcing technology transfers, manipulating trade agreements, and threatening species who didn't comply. We've also documented at least 34 violations of the Council's own laws by elder species, including illegal weapons development and unauthorized territorial expansion. Taiho nodded, satisfied. How deep does our surveillance go? Bora's smile was predatory. Sir, we have listening devices in the private chambers of 11 out of 13 Council members. We've cracked their military communication codes. We've mapped every major installation and fleet position in Council-controlled space. And most importantly, we've made contact with 47 subjugated species who are tired of being controlled. When we release this information, it won't just be humanity standing against the Council. Admiral Hyejin pulled up a tactical display showing fleet positions throughout human space and beyond. My people have been busy too. The Council thinks we have 240 ships scattered across our colonies. They're wrong. We have 240 ships they can see. We've been building in hidden shipyards for the past 8 years, ever since we realized the Council wasn't what it pretended to be. The display zoomed out, revealing dozens of hidden facilities in asteroid fields, remote systems, and deep space construction platforms. We've got another 1,000 ships they don't know about. Smaller, faster, and equipped with weapons designed specifically to counter Council technology. We've also deployed defensive platforms around all our colonies and our home system. If the Council tries to force compliance through military action, they're going to find out that humans learned a lot from 5,000 years of warfare. Taiho looked around at the assembled faces. Human civilization's leadership united in purpose. So we have the evidence to expose them, the intelligence to hurt them, and the military capacity to defend ourselves. The question is, how do we use all of this? We give them exactly what they asked for, Jiwan said, joining the conference from her shuttle. They wanted to evaluate humanity. They wanted to see if we understand our place in their galactic order. So we'll teach them about humanity. We'll show them our history, our wars, our survival against impossible odds. We'll show them that Earth didn't produce a species that submits to bullies. Dr. Minseo nodded enthusiastically. I can put together a presentation that will shake them to their core. Historical footage, comparative analysis, evidence of their crimes. We'll turn their evaluation back on them. And while they're watching pretty pictures, Captain Bora added, they'll also be watching real-time surveillance footage of their own secret facilities. Let them see exactly how thoroughly we've infiltrated their systems. Governor Ki-hyun spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of civilian concerns. What about the people on our colonies? If this goes wrong, we're talking about war with a galactic power that's been around for thousands of years. That's why it won't go wrong, Admiral Hee-jin said firmly. Every colony has been fortified. Every civilian transport has been fitted with military-grade shields and weapons. We've evacuated non-essential personnel from border colonies. And most importantly, we've designed this entire operation around not firing the first shot. The Council wants us to look like the aggressors, the dangerous young species that needs to be controlled. We're going to show them that we're the ones who tried peace, who gathered evidence, who attempted to work within their system. When they're exposed, when their subjugated species rise up, the Council will fracture from within. Taiho watched the determined faces around him, virtual and real. Humanity had come so far in such a short time. A century and a half ago, they'd been confined to one planet, tearing themselves apart in corporate wars and resource conflicts. Then they'd achieved faster-than-light travel, burst out into the galaxy and discovered they weren't alone. The first contact with alien species had unified humanity like nothing else could. The realization that the galaxy was full of civilizations, some peaceful and some not, had focused human purpose with laser precision. And when they'd joined the Galactic Council, they'd done what humans always did when entering a new situation. They'd smiled, been polite, and quietly gathered every piece of information they could get their hands on. They'd studied, learned, adapted, and prepared for the day when the Council's true nature would be revealed. All right, Taiho said. Decision made. Dr. Minseo, you have 60 hours to finalize the presentation. Captain Bora, position your intelligence assets for maximum impact when we release everything. Admiral Hee-jin, get your fleets ready but keep them hidden. The Council is watching for any military buildup. Governor Ki-hyun, prepare your civilian government for what comes next. This will change everything. And me? Ji-won asked. You get to deliver the greatest diplomatic presentation in human history, Taiho said with a slight smile. You're going to walk back into that council chamber and teach those ancient species something they've forgotten over their thousands of years of power. Never mistake patience for weakness, and never threaten a species that survived by learning to hit back harder. The conference call ended, leaving Taiho alone in the underground room. He pulled up the historical files that Dr. Minseo had compiled, scrolling through humanity's bloody past. The wars, the genocides, the near extinctions, but also the moments of unity, the impossible victories, the refusal to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. The Council looked at human history and saw chaos and violence. They didn't understand that every war had taught humanity something valuable. Every conflict had refined their tactics, their technology, their understanding of how to survive. 72 hours passed like the countdown to an execution, except nobody was quite sure who was standing on the gallows. Ji-won walked back into the council chamber with her head high and a data crystal in her hand. The chamber was packed this time, with not just the 13 elder species but also observers from dozens of younger civilizations who'd heard rumors of the confrontation. Everyone wanted to see how humanity would respond to the council's ultimatum. Velmoth sat in his elevated position, his crystalline form catching the light in sharp, aggressive patterns. He'd spent the past 3 days consulting with his military advisors, positioning fleets near human colonies, preparing for what he assumed would be either immediate surrender or a brief educational war. Either way, humanity would learn their place. Ambassador Ji-won, Velmoth's voice carried across the chamber with the confidence of someone who'd never truly been challenged. Have you consulted with your government? Are you prepared to give the council its answer? Ji-won smiled that same unsettling smile from 3 days ago. High Arbiter, my government has indeed considered your demands very carefully. We've prepared a comprehensive response. She held up the data crystal. Before we give you our final answer, however, we'd like to present some educational material. The council claimed our species needs evaluation. We agree. So we've prepared a presentation about humanity, our history, and our understanding of galactic politics. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Councillor Threx's skin had already turned that worried purple color. He'd spent the last 3 days trying to convince his fellow council members that something was wrong, that humanity's reaction was too calm, too confident. Nobody had listened. A presentation? Velmoth sounded amused. Very well. We will indulge this delay. Show us what you believe we need to understand about your species. Jiwan inserted the crystal into the chamber's central display system. The massive holographic projectors came to life, filling the center of the chamber with images. Let me start with what you already know. Earth, our home world, has been home to human civilization for approximately 10,000 years. During that time, we fought countless wars. The display showed ancient battles, armies clashing with swords and spears, cities burning, empires rising and falling. This is what you saw when you evaluated us. Constant conflict, endless violence, and you concluded that we're dangerous children who need to be controlled. She paused, letting the images of human warfare play across the chamber. Several council members nodded, clearly thinking this confirmed their assessment. Then Jiwan's expression changed, became harder. What you didn't understand is what all that warfare taught us. Let me show you some specific examples. The display shifted to more recent history. World War II, nuclear weapons, the devastation of entire cities. In the 20th century, we developed weapons capable of destroying our entire species. We came within minutes of using them multiple times. But we didn't. We learned. The images shifted again, showing the corporate wars of the 22nd century, the resource conflicts that nearly destroyed Earth's biosphere. 100 years ago, we nearly killed ourselves fighting over water and land. Billions died, but we survived, and we learned. Jiwan walked slowly around the chamber's center, making sure to make eye contact with as many council members as possible. The council evaluated our history and saw 5,000 years of warfare. What you failed to recognize is that we fought more wars, developed more weapons, and survived more existential threats in the last 5 centuries than your entire council has faced in 2,000 years of existence. The chamber stirred with uncomfortable murmurs. The display now showed a comparison chart that Dr. Minseo had carefully prepared. It listed every major conflict in recorded galactic history for the past 2 millennia, then compared it to Earth's conflicts in just the last 500 years. The numbers were staggering. Humanity had fought more wars, developed more military technologies, and adapted to more extreme threats than all 13 elder species combined. We are not dangerous because we're young and stupid, Jiwan said quietly. We're dangerous because we're very, very experienced at survival. And we learned something important from all those wars: how to recognize when someone is trying to conquer us while pretending to protect us. The display shifted again, and this time the change made several council members physically recoil. It showed historical records from the Velkari archives, documents that were supposed to be sealed, classified materials about the Velkari expansion wars from 1,500 years ago. The images showed Velkari ships bombarding primitive worlds, forcing species into submission, destroying those who resisted. These are your own records. High Arbiter, Jiwan said, her voice cutting through the shocked silence. Records of the 47 species the Velkari destroyed or absorbed during your expansion phase. Species that you never mention in your official histories. Species that have been erased from galactic memory. Velmoth's crystalline form flashed angry red. Those records are classified. How dare you? How did we get them? Jiwan interrupted, still smiling. That's an interesting question. Let me show you something else. The display split into multiple screens, each showing different locations. Council military installations, supposedly secret research facilities, hidden fleet positions, all in real time, all showing current activity. Captain Bora's intelligence network had been very thorough. We've been watching you, Jiwan said simply. For 8 years since we first suspected the council wasn't what it claimed to be, we've been gathering information. We know about your secret weapons programs. We know about the technology you forced younger species to hand over. We know about the trade agreements you manipulated. We know everything. The chamber erupted in angry voices, accusations, demands for explanation. But Jiwan wasn't finished. Dr. Minseo's presentation was designed to build to a devastating conclusion, and they were only halfway there. Let me show you what protective oversight really means, Jiwan continued, her voice rising above the chaos. The display now showed documents, testimonies, evidence compiled from dozens of sources. 89 species have submitted to council oversight in the past 2,000 years. Not one has ever been released from that oversight. Not one has ever been granted full council membership. They contribute their technology, their resources, their labor, and in return they get to exist under your control. The evidence was overwhelming. Trade records showing systematic exploitation, military reports detailing threats against non-compliant species, internal communications where council members discussed younger species like resources to be managed, rather than civilizations to be respected. Counselor, Threx's skin had gone through so many color changes. He looked like a malfunctioning display screen. Several other council members sat in stunned silence. A few were already calculating how to distance themselves from the Velkari, sensing which way the political winds were blowing. But here's what's most interesting, Jiwan said, and now her smile was absolutely predatory. We've shared all of this information with representatives from 47 subjugated species. We sent them encrypted copies of everything we found in your archives. Right now, in their home systems, their governments are reviewing evidence of exactly how you've controlled them for centuries. Velmoth stood, his entire crystalline body glowing with rage. You have committed an act of war against the Council. You have violated sacred diplomatic protocols. Your species will be crushed for this arrogance. Will we? Jiwan asked calmly. Let me show you one more thing before you make any decisions you can't take back. The final segment of the presentation began. It showed human defensive installations, not the ones the Council knew about, but the hidden ones. Weapons platforms in orbit around every colony, missile batteries capable of firing relativistic projectiles, quantum mines that couldn't be detected until they detonated, defense networks that would make any invasion of human space catastrophically expensive. You wanted to evaluate our military capacity, Jiwan said. You counted 240 ships and decided we were no threat. You were looking at our visible fleet, the one we wanted you to see. Would you like to know how many ships we actually have? The display showed the hidden shipyards, the construction platforms in deep space, the vessels that had been built in secret over 8 years of preparation. The numbers made even the most confident council members go quiet. We have been preparing for this moment since the day we realized the council's true nature, Jiwan continued. We hoped we were wrong. We hoped the council really was the peaceful organization it claimed to be, but we've studied history, our own and yours, and we know what empires look like when they're lying about their intentions. She pulled out a second data crystal. So here's humanity's counteroffer, High Arbiter. The Council will leave us alone. You will not demand our ships, our colonies, or our submission. In return, we will not release all of this evidence to every species in the galaxy. We will not encourage the 47 subjugated species to demand their independence. We will not demonstrate exactly how thoroughly we've penetrated your security systems. The chamber was dead silent now. Every eye was on Jiwan, waiting for the final piece. Velmoth made his choice badly and quickly, which was exactly what Teho had predicted he would do. Arrogant empires rarely responded well to being exposed, especially in front of an audience. Within 6 hours of Jiwan's presentation, the High Arbiter ordered 3,000 Velkari warships to advance on the human colony of New Busan. It was meant to be a demonstration of overwhelming force, a reminder that no matter what evidence humanity had gathered, military power was what truly mattered in the galaxy. Commander Daehyun watched the Velkari fleet approach on his tactical display, sitting in the command chair of the UES Incheon, a destroyer that the Council's intelligence had catalogued as one of humanity's primary military assets. What the Council didn't know was that the Incheon and the 199 other ships currently facing the Velkari fleet were remotely operated drones, advanced AI-controlled vessels with no crew aboard. Humanity had learned long ago that you didn't risk people when you could risk machines instead. Velkari fleet entering weapons range in 10 minutes. His tactical officer, Salmon, reported from the actual command center, located safely in an underground facility on New Busan's second moon. They're maintaining standard battle formation. No indication they suspect these are drones. Daehyun allowed himself a small smile. The Velkari were ancient and experienced, but their experience was with species who fought the way the Council expected. Traditional formations, predictable tactics, and most importantly, a reluctance to sacrifice ships and crew. Humanity had learned to think differently. Begin the retreat, he ordered. Make it look desperate. I want them to think they're winning. The human fleet began to fall back, firing sporadic volleys that the Velkari shields easily absorbed. The enemy fleet pressed forward, confident and aggressive. Their commander was probably already composing the report about how quickly humanity had crumbled, when faced with real military power. 3,000 ships against 200, it was barely even a fight. Except it wasn't a fight. It was a trap. The human drones led the Velkari fleet deeper into the New Busan system, past the third planet, through an asteroid field that tactical scanners showed as empty of threats. The Velkari followed eagerly, sensing victory. Their sensors were sophisticated, capable of detecting most known weapons and defensive systems, but they weren't looking for weapons that had never been used in galactic warfare before because they'd been invented by a species with a very different military history. Velkari fleet has passed the trigger point, Salmon reported. All systems are green. Awaiting your order, Commander. Daehyun watched the tactical display, waiting for the perfect moment. 3,000 enemy ships, the pride of the Velkari military, all clustered together in pursuit of what they thought was a fleeing enemy. His instructors at the Naval Academy would have called this a textbook ambush, except the textbooks were human ones, written by people who'd studied battles from ancient times, through the corporate wars. "Spring it," he said, quietly. The New Busan system came alive with weapons that the Galactic Council had never seen before. Humanity had studied Council military technology for 15 years and noticed something interesting. All of it was based on energy weapons and defensive shields. Lasers, particle beams, plasma cannons, all very sophisticated and powerful. But there was an entire category of weapons that galactic civilization had apparently forgotten about, or never developed. Railguns. 300 orbital platforms suddenly revealed themselves, dropping their stealth fields simultaneously. Each platform mounted multiple railgun batteries capable of accelerating projectiles to a significant percentage of light speed. The math was simple and brutal. Mass times velocity equals destructive force. At relativistic speeds, even small projectiles carried enough kinetic energy to punch through energy shields like they weren't there. The Velkari fleet had approximately 2.3 seconds to realize they'd made a terrible mistake. Then the railguns opened fire. Tungsten projectiles, each weighing several tons and moving at a decent fraction of light speed, tore through the Velkari formation. Energy shields that could absorb laser fire and plasma bursts did nothing against solid matter moving at relativistic velocities. Ships exploded, their hulls shredded by impacts that released energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. The Velkari tried to scatter, to break formation and escape, but they'd been herded into a kill zone designed by people who'd been fighting wars for 5,000 years. The quantum entanglement mines activated next, another technology the Council had never encountered. These weren't traditional mines that sat waiting to be detected. They were paired particles scattered throughout the system, invisible to conventional sensors that would sync their detonation across any distance instantly. One moment there was empty space. The next moment that space was filled with explosions perfectly timed to catch fleeing ships. Velkari fleet is breaking apart, Soman reported, her voice professional but with an edge of satisfaction. Casualty estimates at 40% and rising. They're attempting to retreat. Let them, Daehyun ordered. We're not trying to destroy them, just educate them. Cease fire once they're clear of the inner system. The surviving Velkari ships fled, many of them badly damaged, all of them broadcasting frantic distress signals. Of the 3,000 ships that had entered the system so confidently, less than 1,700 limped away, and humanity hadn't lost a single person because there had been no people in those ships to lose. But the demonstration at New Busan was only one part of a much larger operation. While the Velkari fleet was being shredded in human space, Admiral Hyejin was executing the second phase of Operation Wildfire. Her stealth fleets, the ones the Council had never detected, suddenly appeared in orbit of 12 Council homeworlds simultaneously. The panic was immediate and galaxy-wide. These weren't aggressive positions or attack formations. The human ships simply appeared, sent a single message, and waited. Lieutenant Sumin, who'd been assigned to deliver the message from one of these fleets, kept her voice steady as she broadcast to the Velkari homeworld below. This is Lieutenant Soman of the United Earth Space Forces. We are transmitting from orbit of your primary homeworld. Our fleet has been in position here, undetected for the past 3 weeks. We want to make something very clear. These are purely defensive deployments. We have no intention of attacking your civilians or your worlds. However, we want you to understand that if the Council chooses to escalate this conflict, Humanity has the capacity to be anywhere in council space, without your knowledge. She paused, letting that sink in. On the planet below, the Velkari government was probably experiencing several kinds of chaos simultaneously. Their supposedly impregnable defensive network had been completely bypassed. An enemy fleet was in orbit of their homeworld, and they'd never seen it coming. "These are our defensive positions," Salman continued, echoing the message that was being delivered at 11 other worlds. "Our offensive capabilities are significantly more extensive. We really don't want to demonstrate those. We suggest the Council reconsider its position regarding humanity." At the same moment, Captain Bora activated the final phase of the plan. Every piece of intelligence humanity had gathered, every classified document, every piece of evidence about the Council's activities over 2,000 years, was released simultaneously to communication networks across the entire galaxy. It was too much information to suppress, too widely distributed to contain, and too well documented to deny. News networks across hundreds of worlds suddenly had access to the truth about the Galactic Council. Independent journalists, opposition politicians, civil rights activists, and ordinary citizens of dozens of species started seeing evidence they'd never been allowed to access before. The carefully maintained image of the Council as benevolent protectors crumbled in real time. On 47 worlds, the subjugated species that had been under Council oversight for centuries suddenly had proof of exactly how they'd been exploited. Within hours, protests began. Within days, governments started issuing demands for independence. The Council's authority, maintained for 2 millennia through a combination of military threat and information control, was dissolving faster than anyone had imagined possible. Back at Earth's Defense Command, Taiho watched the tactical displays showing the chaos spreading across Council space. Admiral Heejin's fleets remained in position around Council worlds, not threatening but definitely present. The message was clear. Humanity could reach anyone, anywhere, whenever they wanted. The Council's military superiority was an illusion, maintained only because nobody had ever seriously challenged it before. "Velkari fleet has fully retreated from New Busan," Admiral Heejin reported. "Our drones are returning to base. No human casualties, 0 personnel losses. Commander Daehyun executed the operation perfectly." "And the political situation?" Taiho asked. "Chaos," Heejin replied with a slight smile. 23 subjugated species have formally demanded independence in the last 6 hours. The Council's communication networks are overloaded with protests, demands for reform, and calls for Velmoth's resignation. Councillor Threx has publicly broken with the Velkari, calling for immediate peace negotiations with humanity. It's a complete political collapse. The Council chamber had never been so full, and it would never be the same again. Where once only 13 elder species had sat in judgment over the galaxy, now over 100 species crowded the expanded space. The architecture had been hastily modified to accommodate everyone, destroying the careful symbolism that had made visitors feel small. Representatives from subjugated species sat at the same level as council members. Media drones from dozens of independent networks floated throughout the chamber, broadcasting everything to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Jiwon stood in the center again, but this time she wasn't alone. Taeho stood beside her, along with Dr. Minseo, Captain Bora, and Governor Ki-hyun. Humanity had brought its best people because this wasn't just a negotiation about Earth status. This was about restructuring galactic civilization itself. Velmoth looked diminished somehow, despite his crystalline body still refracting light in complex patterns. The past week had not been kind to him. His military forces had been humiliated. His secrets had been exposed. Species that had feared the Velkari for centuries were now demanding answers and independence. The old order was crumbling, and everyone in the chamber could see it happening in real time. "This emergency session is called to address the current crisis," Velmoth began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Recent events have created instability throughout Council space. Military actions by humanity, the unauthorized release of classified information, and civil unrest among protectorate species all threaten galactic peace." "Protectorate species," a voice called out from the crowd of new representatives. It belonged to a being whose species Jiwon didn't immediately recognize, but whose anger was universal. "Is that what you call 800 years of forced technology transfers and resource exploitation?" The chamber erupted in voices, decades or centuries of suppressed anger suddenly finding expression. Belmoth tried to restore order, but the old authority was gone. Nobody feared the council anymore. Humanity had shown that the Emperor had no clothes, and now everyone could see it clearly. Councillor Threx rose, his skin cycling through colors that G1 had learned to recognize as distress and determination. High Arbiter, we must face the truth. The Council has operated for too long without proper oversight or accountability. Ambassador G1's presentation was not an attack on galactic peace. It was an exposure of practices that violated the founding principles of the Council itself. You dare speak against, Velmoth began, but Threx cut him off. I dare speak the truth that many of us have known for centuries but were too comfortable to address. My own species participated in the subjugation of younger civilizations. We justified it as guidance, as protection, but the evidence is clear. We exploited them, and when humanity refused to submit to the same treatment, we threatened them with military force. The chamber fell quiet. For a council member, especially one of the elder species, to openly admit wrongdoing was unprecedented. It shattered whatever remnants of unified authority the council still possessed. Governor Kihyun stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly despite his shorter stature compared to many species present. The question isn't what happened in the past. We all know what happened, because you've seen the evidence. The question is what happens next. The old system is broken. Everyone can see it now. So what do we build to replace it? G1 looked around the chamber, seeing representatives from species humanity had barely heard of until a week ago. Some looked angry, some frightened, some hopeful. All of them were watching to see what would happen next. The council structure served a purpose once, she said carefully. It brought stability after a period of galactic warfare. But it evolved into something else, something that concentrated power in the hands of a few elder species, while denying voice to everyone else. That system is finished. It died the moment you tried to force humanity into submission, and discovered we'd prepared for exactly that scenario. Velmoth's crystalline form flared bright red. So humanity will dictate terms to the galaxy? You'll replace one empire with another? No, G1 said firmly. That's exactly what we won't do. Earth's history taught us what happens when power concentrates in too few hands. Empires rise, empires fall, and the cycle repeats. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in making sure no one can rule it unjustly. Dr. Minseo activated a display showing a proposal that Earth's best political theorists had been developing for months. We propose a confederation, equal representation for all species regardless of age or military power, rotating leadership with strict term limits, transparent governance with all decisions and debates broadcast publicly, democratic processes for all major policy decisions, and most importantly, strict limitations on military power with mutual defense agreements that protect smaller species without allowing elder species to dominate. The proposal hung in the chamber's central display, and Ji-won watched the reactions carefully. Some species looked skeptical, particularly the elder ones who were being asked to give up power. Others looked cautiously optimistic. A few seemed overwhelmed by the very concept. This would require the council to surrender its authority, one of the elder species representatives said. You're asking us to dismantle 2,000 years of established governance. We're asking you to evolve, Taeho replied. Your system worked when the galaxy was smaller and less connected. But look around this chamber. There are over 100 species here today, and probably thousands more that will develop space travel in the coming centuries. The old system of elder species controlling younger ones doesn't scale. It was always going to collapse eventually. Humanity just accelerated the timeline. Captain Bora spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent years documenting council abuses. We've prepared a Truth and Reconciliation Commission proposal. Dr. Minseo will head it if the Confederation is formed. Every species will have the opportunity to testify about their experiences under council oversight. Not for revenge or punishment, but for understanding. The galaxy needs to know what happened so we can make sure it never happens again. A representative from one of the subjugated species stood, their translator struggling to keep up with their emotional speech. My people have been under Velkari oversight for 600 years. 600 years of being told we weren't ready for full membership, that we needed guidance, that we should be grateful for protection, all while our best technology was transferred to council worlds and our resources were exploited. If this confederation can prevent that from happening to other species, then we support it. Others began to speak, a cascade of voices sharing similar stories. The chamber became something it had never been before, a space where species could speak freely about their experiences without fear of retaliation. The elder species representatives grew quieter as the testimonies continued. Some looked genuinely remorseful, others just looked tired, like people who'd been carrying a heavy burden for too long. Admiral Heejin joined the discussion via holographic link from her flagship. The military restructuring proposal is straightforward. All species maintain defensive forces appropriate to their size and needs. But offensive military capacity will be limited and transparent. Mutual defense agreements ensure that smaller species can't be threatened by larger ones, and humanity will share our defensive technology with any species that wants it, creating a balance of power that makes aggressive war impractical. You would share your weapons technology? Velmoth asked, surprised. The very weapons you used to defeat our fleet? Defensive technology, Heejin corrected. We'll share the railgun platforms, the quantum mines, the stealth systems. Everything needed to make any invasion too costly to contemplate. What we won't share is offensive weapons designed for conquest. The goal is to make warfare obsolete by making it unprofitable. The debate continued for hours, broadcast live across the galaxy. It was messy, emotional, and sometimes chaotic. But it was also something the galaxy hadn't seen in thousands of years. Genuine democracy in action. Species were negotiating their own future rather than having it dictated by ancient powers. Finally, as the debate reached its natural conclusion, Councillor Threx rose again. We need to vote. Not just the Council, but everyone here. Every species represented in this chamber should have a say in whether we dissolve the old Council and form this confederation. The vote was surprisingly clear. 87 species voted in favor. 9 elder species voted against, mostly those who'd benefited most from the old system. The Council, as it had existed for 2 millennia, was officially dissolved. The Galactic Confederation would be formed with its first General Assembly scheduled in 6 months. Velmoth sat in his elevated seat, watching his empire crumble in real time. Finally he spoke, his voice resigned. I maintained order for 800 years. I believed the Council's methods were necessary for galactic stability. Perhaps I was wrong, he stood slowly. I will not participate in this new confederation. The Velkari Empire will withdraw from galactic politics. That's your choice, Juan said without malice. But the species under Velkari oversight will be given the choice of independence or voluntary association. No more forced protectorates.